This video has been brought to you in part by my supporters over on Patreon. If you like what I do and want to help support the future of the channel for as little as £1 or $1.50 a month, as well as see new videos early, get exclusive bonus content, and access to my Discord server, becoming a patron is the best way to do that. Link can be found down below. Now time for another episode of Hot Beings.
Here's our orbit slightly leaning, orbiting star.
Adapted from the webcomic of the same name, Strange Planet is an Apple TV anthology series created by Nathan Pyle. The show takes place on a rotating orb in space not unlike our own, populated by these creatures called beings, with each episode focused around a particular topic one usually deals with at pivotal stages in their life, namely young adulthood, following a single or multiple storylines that tie back into the central theme. It's a quirky, slightly existential comedy that calls attention to how peculiar humans would be if viewed through an outside lens, poking fun at how absurd our behaviour actually is.
Oh! Woo! Come on, give it a try.
Don't worry, everybody. Just screaming for comfort.
Okay, cool. Great.
This is the type of show people have been wanting for a long time, since it's an adult animated series that doesn't feel the need to constantly fill the screen with gratuitous violence or be as offensive as possible just because it can. Yet it is still unmistakably not aimed at kids, tackling real issues people experience such as being in your mid-20s and feeling like you haven't accomplished as much as others, struggling to find a work-life balance, or moving away from your parents for the first time. However, the reaction the show has received ever since its premiere has been rather mixed, and I understand it's not a show for everyone, but I can't help but feeling like quite a few of the reviews I've seen have missed the point and can carry something similar to ableist undertones, because Strange Planet is easily the most neurodivergent friendly piece of media I have ever seen. As it's a show about exploring how confusing humans are, it goes about this by having all its characters speak very literally, where everyone says exactly what they mean in the most honest and direct way possible, so there's no room for any misunderstanding and guesswork when it comes to how they feel, which is quite validating because that's how a lot of autistic people's brains work. Though we are often viewed as unsociable or even less than human because we want to ensure there is no room to misinterpret our words, hence why we are often labelled as robots. So to see a show where every single character explains and processes information the same way is incredibly gratifying.
Oh no, I spilled my notebook. Guess this interaction will extend for more time as I pick it up.
This sort of directness is also found in the labels the show applies, where the standard names of actions and objects have been replaced with more literal meanings to, again, hold a mirror up to ourselves. For instance, dancing has been opted out for the phrase limb shaking, because when you think about it, that's all dancing is. Intensity, speed, and precision may change depending on the style or skill level, but we're all still merely shaking our limbs at the end of the day. Or how alcohol is referred to as mild poison, because yeah, it's pretty weird how we as humans will consume something we know is bad and potentially dangerous to us for the purpose of feeling good. Or perhaps that's just me, because I only started drinking fairly recently, and even then don't partake in the mild poison very often. It further drives home the idiosyncratic thesis that the comic, and now the series, have been built on. Humans are very odd creatures, which is something we don't really think about because we aren't really used to having it pointed out, which only puts things in perspective. So when watching the series, you'll likely find yourself thinking, yeah, it is a bit strange how we celebrate the anniversary of our birth. Why do some of us enjoy doing things that simulate almost dying? Or hey, being a teenager is actually really horrifying and society does everything it can to ensure that it is as stressful and traumatic as possible. Fun things like that. The series does tread into some light philosophy, though never to a point that it's going to send you on a spiral, because it has this subtle way of touching upon some existentialist themes, but like the dialogue, it's all in a very matter-of-fact sort of way. Thus the series can tell you that in the grand scheme of things we matter very little, but also that our lives and experiences are important, and those two ideas aren't mutually exclusive. In a sense, the show is poking fun at the concept of existential dread because it looks at a world obsessed with finding the meaning in life and says merely existing in itself is meaningful, so why should the grand scheme of things even matter to us? One thing that strikes me is that the characters in this show are all non-binary, where every being, however they are presenting, are referred to using they-them pronouns. While this can be viewed as a way of demonstrating how nonsensical gender boundaries and the emphasis placed on them in our society are, it can also be viewed as a commentary on how neurodivergent people can have a very different relationship with gender identity than a neurotypical person. Because we struggle with understanding supposed social norms and are often already ostracized, we can feel more freedom to experiment with those aspects of our identity since we are already far outside of what the people in power have dubbed normal. And as a queer gender fluid person with autism and ADHD, this show has simply been able to speak to me on a level I've never quite experienced before. But Jake, I hear you ask, neurodivergent and non-binary representation that makes you feel properly seen for the first time ever is all well and good, but what about the plot? The lore? Surely a random anthology series poking fun at humanity doesn't have any sort of ongoing story, right?
Wrong!
While each episode of the show provides a wholly unique experience, there are some reoccurring characters and storylines that help the end product feel very cohesive, and they all involve the primary location of Careful Now, a restaurant built precariously on a cliffside that may or may not be in danger of falling into the mysterious crevasse below. The establishment is first introduced in episode 2 alongside its staff and patrons, with major emphasis being put on the manager, the owner, and one of the regular customers who harbours romantic feelings for the manager, kick-starting an awkward yet endearing romance that builds throughout the season. Then later, they deal with a new hire, as well as their structural engineer whose main job it is to prevent Careful Now from falling off the cliff. And despite none of these characters being given names, you do come to know them pretty well, and find yourself becoming invested in their hopes, struggles, and even their outlook on life. However, despite having the most focus, these characters don't take over or distract from the episodic storytelling the show aims for. Instead, they'll often make up a side story in an episode, or show up as a supporting character in other beings' adventures, which further adds to making this world feel more concrete and real in a sense. With this idea of going about your day and focusing on your own thing, but also running into these people you may or may not know who have their own stuff going on. An episode can be about a parent struggling to let go of their child who's moving away to continue their studies, but then they also run into the manager. Strange Planet explores the idea of how interconnected we all are as people, in that while we have our priorities and are the main character of our own story, we are simultaneously the background and supporting characters in countless other people's stories, and it is able to achieve this through the inclusion of Careful Now as a place where all these narratives can coexist. The restaurant could host a talent show, forcing a being to confront their stage fright, or perhaps students from a local school could arrange to throw a dance there, or maybe something as simple as friends meeting up for a casual get-together as the inciting incident or conclusion of an episode. And it isn't only Careful Now. Throughout all of Beangsburg, you'll see characters from previous episodes just in the background, continuing to live their lives even when they are no longer the focus of a storyline. Across the season, the staff at Careful Now, including the regular customer who pretty much becomes an employee by the end, are preparing for the viewing of a once every 15-year eclipse, or as they call it, Double Shadow Day, and circumventing disaster after disaster while being undertrained and understaffed, which anyone who has worked in retail or the service industry will heavily relate to. Throughout this though, the threat of the restaurant falling into the mysterious crevasse becomes increasingly more prominent to a point where when those final episodes rolled around, I was on the edge of my seat awaiting the building's fate. Which is what I suspect is exactly what the writers wanted, because, spoiler alert, the restaurant remains fully intact by the end of the season, and the idea of it falling down doesn't really come into play much, which at first confused me. I had been watching the show hearing these rather foreboding warnings and thought they were building up to something, like the season was going to end with Careful Now taking a massive tumble, but that's not the intention behind this aspect of the show. It isn't some ominous foreshadowing, it's an exploration over the anxiety yet excitement over an uncertain future. I saw the structural engineer saying he was mostly sure the restaurant wouldn't plummet as an indication it absolutely would, instead of a comment about how we as humans can never really be truly certain of future events, but we shouldn't let that hold us back from enjoying life moment to moment. It's saying, sure, our lives could come crashing down in the next minute, but right now we're all here and we're all together, so let's enjoy that instead of worrying about what might happen after. The mysterious crevasse below Careful Now itself itself represents the range of reactions humans can have to confronting the unknown. Some of us desire to explore and understand what we at a time couldn't comprehend, whereas others are content with the mystery and would rather not consider any wider implications. Yet like everything else, it tackles this very complicated topic in a simple but still meaningful way. Hence why some of the most enjoyable scenes of the show consist of two characters simply talking about their different worldviews and challenging each other's perspectives.
How many ink stains do you have?
6. 3 that I like, 2 that I regret, and 1 that I know I spent currency on but I cannot locate?
Do you have a favorite?
I really like this one. I got it while I was at the Learn Institution for Meteorology.
Because you see the rain clouds before the star?
Because there's a lot of beauty in the rain. Plus, in my defense, it did rain a ton the summer I got it.
But you could have gone for the star.
I'd rather be prepared for the rain.
What if the rain doesn't come?
The rain has to come eventually. It is necessary for survival.
But all of this has mostly been the preamble for why I really wanted to make a video on this show, to talk about episode 8,
Tiny Trash,
and why I have rewatched it at least once a week ever since it premiered. The episode focuses on a being celebrating their 25th emergence day, and the difficult feelings that stirs up for them as they reevaluate their entire existence. They've recently had their heart broken, are struggling to hold down a job, and feel behind schedule in terms of where they should be in life.
I've been around our star 25 times, but I haven't done much. I guess I'm wondering if I'm going anywhere or if I'm just stuck.
Meanwhile, their friends and family are attempting to throw them a surprise party, while of course poking fun at how cruel the deception is, putting a loved one under the impression that everyone forgot or doesn't care about them, only to pull the rug out from under them later. The best friend goes to collect them, however things go awry when the being decides to explore new experiences to try and feel alive, meaning the party has to be continuously postponed until the two friends end up in a cable car which comes to a sudden halt.
I think we're stuck.
Great! Stuck with no real employment. Stuck without a partner. Stuck on a group dangle machine. No amount of getting back out there can change this.
They eventually make it to the party, and while the being is grateful and relieved to see people didn't actually forget, it does very little to lift their mood until they reunite with their grandparent as they sit down and have a heart-to-heart.
Can I share with you a little lesson I learned?
Sure.
The challenging moments in your life are just that.
Challenging?
Moments, sweetie. They are moments in time that will pass, and eventually you'll barely remember them. The bad moments will pass. Even the good moments will pass. But everything you do and experience, that's what our existence is all about.
This whole episode, but especially these final moments, was something I desperately needed to hear. I graduated from university a while ago, where I went from a secure, structured life where all that mattered was class and spending time with my friends, to being thrown headfirst into the deep end of adulthood. And ever since then, I felt completely lost. I found moments of joy where I felt a passion for life again, but mostly I feel as though I've just been floating from one thing to another, just wanting to find something that gets my feet back on the ground again. I work long hours at a job that gives me near constant sensory overload and migraines, struggle to see my friends often, rarely have the chance to go home and visit my family, and can't escape the growing fear I'm going nowhere, waiting for a moment my life finally falls into place that might never arrive. On top of that, there's the fact that my dream career and what I've trained the past 5 years for is the performing arts, which is such a difficult industry to break into, and I often question if I have what it takes or if that's even what I want anymore. I've lost interest in so many things I used to be passionate about for seemingly no reason, and there are days where I don't even feel like a person anymore. When I got in that headspace, it became so easy to isolate myself and believe I'm the only one out there who feels this way. Then one day I decided to watch Strange Planet because it looked like a wholesome, fun time that was aimed more for people in my age range. And while I enjoyed the show, this episode was something else. It almost felt like it was speaking directly to me, but it wasn't. It was speaking to everyone out there in the exact same position and telling them they're doing a lot better than they realize. Going to great lengths to ease fears by showing how these feelings are universal and everyone goes through them at one point or another.
Hey, you there! Have you ever felt stuck?
Stuck? Well, sure, I've been stuck many times.
I designed machinery for so long, I started to believe I may be a machine myself. I was stuck in a job and felt like I lost a part of myself.
I was stuck on an island once. Took folks a few days to discover that my ship was wrecked in a storm.
Once I was stuck in a ship. A relationship, huh?
Maybe things aren't where you want them to be. Maybe you don't even know where you want them to be. It won't stay that way forever, but you can't force those kinds of revelations. After all, the true meaning of life is the meaning we each find within it. So take stock of your relationships and understand how much you've actually achieved in your so far short time on this planet. Instead of desperately trying to look for fulfillment, just keep living as you are, trying to enjoy those little moments, and eventually, it'll find you. I mean, after so many failed attempts back in high school, I never thought I'd try starting a YouTube channel again, but jump ahead a few years later, and it's easily the best decision I've ever made.
I've been feeling down lately about my life circumstances. It led me to a spiral of mild to moderate despair. Seeing your faces tonight was genuinely unexpected and unexpectedly inspiring. I'd been pining for something unknown and intangible, but your presence reminded me that I've had all I've ever truly needed.
I wanted to talk about this show and this episode because I'm guessing there's people watching right now that needed to hear something like this. My plan was to originally upload this on New Year's Eve, which while that would have been so thematically relevant, rather than pushing to get it done, I decided to practice what the show preaches and prioritize my own well-being and enjoyment. I've still barely scratched the surface of everything this show has to offer and cannot recommend it highly enough. Strange Planet really isn't like anything you've seen in terms of Western animation before. A cartoon specifically aimed at young adults that treats them with intelligence and dignity, that explores our life experiences in a way nothing else really has and spreads a positive and hopeful message, waxing philosophically on the amusing impermanence and unpredictability of life without drowning its viewer with vulgarity or nihilism. Not bad for a show about nameless balloon people who call raccoons small grey finger bandits. Until next time folks, I've been the Gladding Gladiator, and however your year has been going thus far, I hope you know you're doing okay. As always, thank you tremendously to my Patreon patrons, The Wacky Deli, Torai Matson, Blast6, Tomb for Thought, and Toby Fangor. If you like what I do and want to help support the future of the channel, as well as gain access to videos early and some other fun perks, you can do so by becoming a Patreon member. Link can be found down below. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking the video as it helps me out a bunch. And tell me down below your thoughts on Strange Planet. Have you seen the show yet? Have you only read the webcomic and didn't even know there was a series? I'd love to discuss it with you. Thanks so much for watching folks, and I'll see ya real soon.